What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my fantasy football picks for NFL Week 4. If you're playing DraftKings or FanDuel, you can call these sleepers and studs. If you're playing season-long fantasy football, you can call these your must-starts and your streamers.
Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 4, let's take a look at the quarterback position. Oh, just remember, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tennessee Titans, that game has been postponed. So take any of those players from those teams, take them out of your lineup. They're not going to score fantasy points this week. Okay, let's get into the quarterback position. My must start at the quarterback position is Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Cleveland Browns, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Dak Prescott has averaged 31.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.7 rush attempts per game. He scored 34, 44, and 18 fantasy points in the first 3 weeks of the season. He's going to be about 11% owned here. He's projected at 27.6 fantasy points here in Week 4. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary and $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 56 points scored in this game, so a high-scoring game, and they have the Dallas Cowboys favored by 4.5. So it's a great matchup, a high-scoring game, and it's a closer game than I would have thought here versus the Browns. So I like Dak Prescott here versus the Cleveland Browns. Okay, and if you're looking for a Week 4 streamer or a sleeper pick here at the quarterback position, take a look at Ryan Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Ryan Fitzpatrick has averaged 20.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5 rush attempts per game. He scored 25 and 27 fantasy points in the last 2 games. He's going to be about 7% owned here, projected at 18.5 fantasy points here in Week 4. But I think this turns into a shootout. I think Fitzpatrick has to throw the ball at least 40 times in this one. I think he can get 20 to 25 fantasy points or more in this matchup, and he's $5,400 DraftKings salary and $1,700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Miami Dolphins trailing by 6.5. So we got a high-scoring game, a fantastic matchup, and this should be a passing game script for Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I like Ryan Fitzpatrick here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My Week 4 must start at the running back position is Kenyon Drake from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Carolina Panthers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Kenyon Drake, he's only averaged 11.6 fantasy points per game on the season, but he's getting an average of 18 rush attempts per game and about 2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 14% owned. He's on the field for 68% of the snaps. He touches the ball 39% of that time. I'm just waiting for a breakout game from Kenyon Drake, and it could come here in Week 4. He's projected at 16.7 fantasy points here in Week 4, and he's $6,000 DraftKings salary and $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game. They have the Cardinals favored by 3. So we got a great positional matchup here. Second worst team versus opposing running backs. We have a high scoring game and a competitive game. So I like Kenyon Drake here versus the Carolina Panthers. Okay, in a streamer play here in week 4, I like Daryl Henderson from the LA Rams playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Daryl Henderson Jr. has averaged 14.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11.7 rush attempts per game and 2 pass targets per game. But he scored 22 fantasy points last week off of 20 rush attempts and 3 pass targets. He's only going to be about 2% owned here, and he's projected at 14.8 fantasy points here in week 4. He's only $5,800 DraftKings salary and $600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and they have the Rams favored by 12.5. So this could definitely be a running game script with a pretty good matchup. So I like Daryl Henderson Jr. here versus the New York Giants.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks.
Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So, the must start in week 4, I like Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Miami Dolphins, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Tyler Lockett, he's averaged 25.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.7 pass targets per game. He scored 40, 20, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 13, 8, and 8 pass targets. So he's getting monster volume. He's going to be about 16% owned here. He's on the field for 96% of the snaps, touches the ball 15% of that time, projected at 17.4 fantasy points here in week 4. He's $7,000 DraftKings salary and $500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 53.5 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 6.5. So I'm going to start Tyler Lockett here versus the Miami Dolphins. Okay, and if you're looking for a sleeper pick or a streamer play for fantasy football here at the wide receiver position, take a look at Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks, he's only averaged 7.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6 pass targets per game. He scored 5, 15, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but he's getting pretty decent volume, 5, 8, and 4 pass targets. He's going to be about 10% owned here, on the field for 76% of the snaps. He touches the ball 14% of that time. He's projected at 11.1 fantasy points here in week 4, and he's only $4,500 DraftKings salary and $800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 53.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Texans favored by 4. So you got a high-scoring game, a fantastic matchup. He's got plenty of volume. This guy's got nice upside. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My must start is Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Buffalo Bills, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, but they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller has averaged 15 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.3 pass targets per game. Now, he was a little hobbled last game. He only got 4 pass targets and scored 3 fantasy points. But this guy is a stud. He got 16 pass targets the game before that and put up 31 fantasy points. So I'm expecting the volume here in week 4 to come up to at least 8 to 10 pass targets now that he's fully healthy. And he's going to be about 20% owned, on the field for 92% of the snaps, touches the ball 15% of the time. He's projected at 14.5 fantasy points here in week 4. He's $5,200 DraftKings salary and $1,500 more on FanDuel. So Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 52.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Las Vegas Raiders trailing by 3. So the Buffalo Bills look pretty good. This is a nice matchup, high-scoring game. And if the Las Vegas Raiders fall behind in this game, it could be a passing game script, and Darren Waller could get a ton of targets here. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Buffalo Bills. Okay, and this is just a gut feeling here for this tight end. I like TJ Hawkinson. If you're looking for a sleeper or a streamer here in fantasy football in week 4, take a look at TJ Hawkinson. He's averaged 12 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.3 pass targets per game. He got 7 pass targets last game. He's only going to be about 3% owned. He's on the field for 72% of the snaps. He touches the ball 11% of that time. He's projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 4. He's $4,800 DraftKings salary and $600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54.5 points scored in this game, with the Detroit Lions trailing by 4.5. So you got everything you want in this matchup here. Fantastic matchup, super high scoring game. The Detroit Lions should fall behind the New Orleans Saints, who get Michael Thomas back. They should have to throw the ball. TJ Hawkinson has been one of the favorite targets of Matthew Stafford. So I like TJ Hawkinson here versus the New Orleans Saints.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.